Hey everyone, welcome back to Speak Up, the podcast that helps you improve your English fluency in a smart and effective way. Whether you're a first-time listener or a regular, we appreciate you joining us today.
That's right. If you've ever struggled with remembering new words, you're not alone. You learn a word today, feel confident about it, but by tomorrow, gone. It just disappears from your memory. So why does this happen? And more importantly, how can we fix it? Let's get into it.
You know, this is something I've personally experienced so many times. I'd come across a word, use it a few times, and then after a few days, I'd completely forget it. It felt like no matter how hard I tried, the words just wouldn't stick. And this doesn't just happen to beginners. It happens to everyone. But there's actually a scientific reason behind it. Have you heard of something called Ebbinghaus forgetting curve? It's a fascinating concept. A German psychologist, Hermann Ebbinghaus, studied how quickly we forget new information, and what he found was shocking. Within just 24 hours, we forget nearly 70% of what we learn, unless we make an effort to retain it. And if we don't reinforce that information, we lose even more over time. That's why we struggle to recall new words, even if we understand them when we first learn them. Our brain automatically filters out what it doesn't see as essential. And that's exactly why most of us keep forgetting vocabulary so quickly.
Yes. And this is why traditional memorization techniques don't work as well as people expect. Think about how most people try to memorize words. They repeat them over and over, hoping that somehow their brain will lock them in. But that's not how memory works. Our brain doesn't like isolated facts. It thrives on patterns and associations. If you just read a word and try to force it into your memory without any context, your brain won't see it as useful. It's like trying to memorize a random phone number without actually needing to dial it. It doesn't stick. That's why learning words in context is so much more effective. When you connect a word to a situation, a feeling, or a personal experience, it becomes meaningful. For example, let's say you learn the word elated, which means extremely happy. If you just memorize it from a list, you'll probably forget it soon. But if you associate it with a real moment, like the joy of getting a job offer or winning a competition, your brain links the word to an emotion and a memory, making it far more likely to stick. That's the real secret to remembering new words, giving them meaning instead of treating them like a list of random letters.
That makes so much sense. I used to think the best way to build vocabulary was to just sit with a dictionary and go through lists of words, but now I realize why that never worked for me. It's not just about seeing a word, it's about forming a real connection with it. The brain naturally remembers things that are relevant to us. That's why people remember song lyrics so easily. They hear them repeatedly, associate them with emotions, and sometimes even visualize scenes while listening. But when it comes to vocabulary, most learners don't use that same approach. They try to store words like a computer saves data, but our brains don't work that way. Instead, we need to actively engage with new words, see them, hear them, use them, and relate them to something familiar. When that happens, the word moves from short-term memory to long-term memory, and that's how it truly becomes a part of your vocabulary.
And this is why so many learners feel stuck when trying to improve their vocabulary. They focus too much on memorization and not enough on application. Think about when kids learn a language. They don't sit with flashcards or word lists. They hear words being used in conversations. They repeat them in different contexts, and they experience real situations that make those words meaningful. Adults can learn the same way, but the problem is we often rely too much on studying words in isolation. If you learn the word serene and just read its definition, you might forget it. But if you actually picture a peaceful place, maybe a quiet beach at sunset, and associate the word with that image, your brain will create a stronger memory. The key takeaway here is that words aren't meant to be memorized. They're meant to be lived. If you want to remember new vocabulary, you have to integrate it into your daily life in a way that feels natural and engaging.
You know, Priya, this makes me think about how we were taught vocabulary in school. Remember those long lists of words we had to memorize? We'd look at a word, repeat it 5 times, write it down, and then hope it would stick. But in reality, most of those words just disappeared from our memory after a few days. It's like trying to store water in your hands. It just slips away. And the reason is simple. Memorizing words in isolation doesn't work. Our brain doesn't function like a dictionary. It's designed to make connections. If a word has no context, no emotional link, and no relevance, it becomes just another random fact, easy to forget.
Think about how children learn a language. They don't sit down with a vocabulary book. Instead, they hear words in real-life English conversations, they see those words being used in different contexts, and they naturally pick them up. That's why learning words in context is so much more powerful than just memorizing definitions. Let's take an example. Imagine you're trying to learn the word elated, which means extremely happy. If you just read its definition, it might not stick. But what if you connect it to a personal experience? Let's say you got a surprise birthday gift from your best friend. Instead of just saying, "I was happy," you could say, "I was elated when I opened the gift." Now, your brain isn't just storing the word, it's linking it to an emotion, a real memory, and a situation. That's how words become unforgettable.
That's a great example. And it's not just about emotions. We can also use storytelling techniques to make words stick. Have you ever noticed how we remember stories better than random facts? That's because our brain is wired for storytelling. If I tell you the word serene means calm and peaceful, you might forget it. But if I say, imagine sitting by a quiet lake at sunrise with no noise, just a soft breeze, doesn't that feel serene? Now you have a mental image, a feeling, and a connection. That's what makes storytelling such a powerful tool for learning vocabulary.
Absolutely. And here's another trick. Use new words in your daily conversations. Instead of just learning them and moving on, actually speak them out loud. If you recently learned the word reluctant, which means unwilling or hesitant, don't just remember it, use it. If your friend invites you to a party and you're unsure about going, say, "I'm a bit reluctant to go because I have work tomorrow." The more you use words in real situations, the more natural they become. This is where most English learners struggle. They learn words but never use them, and if you don't use a word, you lose it.
Let's now discuss the visualization trick, how images improve memory. You see, our brain isn't designed to remember plain text or random words. It's wired for images. There's actually a scientific term for this, the picture superiority effect. It means we remember visuals way better than words alone. That's why when we think of an elephant, we don't see the letters ELEPHANT in our minds. Instead, we picture a huge animal with big ears and a trunk. But when it comes to learning English, most people just stare at words, read their definitions, and expect them to stick. That's where they go wrong. If you want to expand your English vocabulary, you need to see words, not just read them.
Our memory works best when we associate new words with mental images. Let me give you an example. Take the word gregarious. It means someone who is very social and loves being around people. Now, instead of just memorizing the definition, imagine a guy at a party, laughing, talking to everyone, the center of attention. The next time you hear gregarious, your brain will instantly recall that image, and boom, the word is locked in your memory. This technique works even better for beginners who struggle with memorizing words. The more vivid and personal the image, the stronger the recall.
That's a brilliant trick. And it's not just about imagination. You can also use technology to make this easier. There are some amazing apps that help visualize vocabulary. For example, apps like Anki and Quizlet let you create digital flashcards with pictures. Instead of just seeing the word serendipity, which means a happy accident, you can add a picture of a kid finding money on the ground. That way, every time you review the word, the image strengthens your memory. Another great app is Memories, which uses real-life videos and animations to make words come alive. These are some of the best apps to learn English because they don't just give you words, they give you images and context, making learning more natural and fun.
Absolutely, and here's something even simpler. Just draw your own pictures. Even if you're not an artist, sketching a simple image linked to a word can boost your memory. Say you're learning the word lofty, which means very tall or high. Instead of just repeating the word, draw a tall mountain or a skyscraper. The act of creating that image helps your brain store the word more deeply. This technique works wonders for English beginners because it forces them to interact with the word instead of passively memorizing it.
Now let's talk about one of the most powerful memory techniques, the spaced repetition method. You might have noticed this. You cram a bunch of new words for a test, feel confident, but a week later, poof, you've forgotten almost everything. That happens because our brain isn't designed to store tons of new information at once. This is exactly why cramming fails. Instead of forcing your brain to absorb everything in one go, you need to review words strategically over time. This is where spaced repetition comes in. It's a proven method that strengthens your recall by spacing out your reviews at increasing intervals.
Exactly. Think of it like watering a plant. If you flood it with water in one day and then forget about it for a month, it dies. But if you water it regularly, just enough, the roots get stronger. Learning English fast isn't about memorizing hundreds of words overnight. It's about reviewing words at the right time so they move into your long-term memory. The best way to do this is through a structured review schedule. Start by reviewing new words after one day, then after 1 week, then after 1 month. This method helps professionals, students, basically anyone who wants to retain new words for life.
And the best part? You don't have to do this manually. There are amazing apps that automate the process. Anki and Quizlet are two of the best tools for spaced repetition. They use smart algorithms to remind you to review words right before you're about to forget them. Let's say you're learning the word meticulous, which means paying extreme attention to detail. If you see it today, the app will show it again tomorrow, then in a few days, then in a few weeks, just when your brain needs that refresher. That's how you fix English grammar mistakes and vocabulary gaps permanently without feeling overwhelmed.
That's such a game changer. And if you're serious about learning English fast, set a realistic goal, like memorizing 50+ words per week using this method. Start with 5 words a day, review them at set intervals using spaced repetition apps, and by the end of the month, you'll have stored over 200 new words in your long-term memory. This technique is especially helpful for English professionals who need a strong vocabulary for work. Instead of wasting time on ineffective learning, just 10 minutes a day with the right system can make a huge difference.
Let's move on to one of the most powerful techniques for locking new words into your memory, the shadowing technique. Have you ever noticed that when you hear a song over and over, the lyrics just stick in your mind? That's because repetition and active engagement are the keys to retention. Shadowing works the same way, but instead of just listening, you also repeat words out loud. This not only strengthens your memory, but also improves your pronunciation and fluency.
Exactly. The shadowing technique for fluency is simple but incredibly effective. Here's how it works. First, you listen to a sentence in English. This could be from a podcast, an audiobook, or even a movie. Then, you immediately repeat the words out loud, copying the pronunciation, speed, and rhythm as closely as possible. The goal is to train your brain to think in English, so instead of memorizing words passively, you actively engage with them through speaking. It's one of the best ways to speak English confidently because you're not just reading words, you're actually using them like a native speaker.
Right. And if you want to take this to the next level, combine shadowing with English pronunciation tips. For example, let's say you're learning the word entrepreneur. Instead of just reading it, listen to a native speaker say it, then repeat it several times, matching their pronunciation. You'll notice how your accent and fluency start improving naturally. Plus, when you hear and say the word repeatedly, your brain forms stronger memory connections, so it sticks better. This is why shadowing is such an effective English listening practice. You're not just passively absorbing information, you're actively training your brain.
That's so true. And if you struggle with remembering complex words, try shadowing with shorter phrases first. Start with simple sentences like, I'm absolutely delighted to be here, Adia. Then move on to more advanced words like, his speech was incredibly articulate and persuasive. With just 10 to 15 minutes a day, this method can completely transform how you learn and use new vocabulary. The key is consistency. Keep practicing, and soon, these words will become second nature.
Now, let's talk about one of the most underrated yet powerful techniques for memorizing new words: writing. Many people focus on speaking and listening, but they forget that writing forces your brain to actively retrieve words rather than just recognizing them. When you write, you're not just seeing or hearing a word, you're engaging with it deeply, which makes it much harder to forget. That's why writing is one of the fastest ways to learn English. It strengthens your ability to recall and use words in real-life situations.
That's so true. And the best part? You don't need to be a professional writer to use this method. Simple practices like journaling, storytelling, or summarizing what you read or watch can make a huge difference. For example, let's say you've just learned the word meticulous. Instead of just memorizing the definition, try writing a sentence like, "She is very meticulous when planning her schedule." This way, you're not just learning the word, you're actually using it in context, which helps you remember it long term. This is one of the best English grammar made easy strategies because it naturally improves your sentence structure and fluency.
Exactly. And here's something even more interesting. Writing also helps you master casual versus formal English. For instance, in a casual setting, you might write, "I'm super happy about my new job." But in a formal email, you'd say, "I'm delighted to announce my new job position." When you actively practice writing, you start to recognize these differences effortlessly, which is extremely useful for both daily conversations and professional communication.
That's a great point. And here's a simple but powerful daily habit to memorize 10+ words effectively. Just write a short paragraph every day using new words you've learned. It could be a small journal entry, a social media post, or even a message to a friend. The more you engage with words through writing, the more naturally they become a part of your vocabulary. This method is a game changer for anyone who wants to improve their English writing skills and expand their vocabulary faster.
Now, let's talk about something crucial: how to make sure the words you learn stick permanently in your mind. You see, learning new words is one thing, but actually remembering and using them in real life is another. And the best way to do this? Real-life English conversations. When you actively use new words while speaking, they become a natural part of your vocabulary. This is why so many people struggle to understand native English speakers. It's not just about knowing words, it's about being able to recall and use them instantly in conversation.
Exactly, and to make vocabulary stick, you need a balanced approach. Both passive learning, listening, reading, and active learning, speaking, writing. If you're just listening to English podcasts or watching movies, that's great, but unless you also speak and write in English, you won't fully retain the words. A simple way to improve is by practicing English conversation alone. Just talk to yourself in English. Describe your day, express your thoughts, or even narrate what you're doing. This helps reinforce the words you've learned in a natural way.
And here's another secret: use English idioms and phrases to make words more memorable. For example, instead of just learning the word exhausted, try using an idiom like "I'm dead tired" or "I'm running on fumes." When you connect new words with expressions that native speakers use, it makes them much easier to remember and apply. Plus, it helps you sound more natural and fluent when speaking.
That's a great tip. And here's one final powerful technique. Create your own personal word bank. Every time you learn a new word, write it down with an example sentence and review it regularly. You can use a notebook, a mobile app, or even sticky notes around your home. This way, you're not just memorizing random words, you're building a collection of useful, practical vocabulary that you'll actually use. This is one of the best ways to learn English at home effectively.
So, now you have a complete set of powerful techniques to memorize words smartly and permanently. The key is to stay consistent, practice daily, use new words in conversations, and apply these methods in real life. That's how you'll see real improvement.
Exactly. And if you found these tips helpful, be sure to keep practicing and stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive into another exciting topic to help you improve your English fluency even faster.